June. Claire, can I ask you to start the recording, please?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that started.
Thank you. I'll go through some preliminaries for a start. As usual, if members can activate their cameras when speaking to enable you to join by video. But please turn your camera off and mute your microphone when not speaking. Please do not comment during items unless invited to do so. If members wish to speak on any point, please raise your hand in the Teams meeting, or if you've dialed into the meeting, you can raise your hand by pressing *5. And lastly, if members lose connection or have any technical issues during the meeting, please alert the committee officer, or alternatively, support is available and the nominated officer is Brian Black. So I'll turn to the agenda and ask Claire to take the sentiment, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start with Councillor Crawley.
Present.
Councillor Davidson.
Present.
Councillor Forsyth.
Present.
Councillor Hassan.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Lang.
Present.
Councillor McAllister.
Present.
Councillor Nicholl.
Present.
I have apologies from Councillor Owen, and I have apologies from Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Sterling.
Present.
And yourself, Chair, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, I am present. Thank you very much. Now, the first item is slightly different from the usual format in that we are recognising a particular group, and we welcome here today Colin Allenich, Ali Hall Bailey and Alan Smith, representing Ayton Cycle Club. They've been nominated for a Pride of Formartine Award. They've been involved heavily and excelled in taking forward the Ellen Wheeled Park project. They consulted widely, they fundraised, they oversaw the construction, and more than that, have really taken the project forward. And I've just asked them to come forward to receive this award. But before I do that, can I invite Councillor Davidson to say a few words as nominating councillor on their behalf? Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. A long time ago, quite a number of young people around Ellen had asked for more facilities, especially a skate park or something similar. And we tried various things, but because these folk were quite young, they couldn't really bring it forward. And Anouk and I kind of did something for a while, and then Louise came on board as well when you came in. But again, we didn't really have the knowledge to take that forward. And then the cycle club, led by Colin, offered to take it on. And we were so delighted, and we were even more delighted at the progress they made. It really is a fantastic facility. And when you go now to it, it absolutely makes your heart sing, because all sorts of people are there, from tiny little kids to older people on their adaptive bikes. And you know, there's something there for everyone. And the pedal car race on Saturday, again, fantastic addition. You know, it's better there really than in the town centre. It was good in the town centre, but there's quite a lot of disruption, and drivers' attitudes have changed, I think, to town centre closures. So, you know, all the things that you do are absolutely admirable, and I was very pleased to nominate you for this award. And I really want to thank you very much for what you do and what you're continuing to do for Ellen, because I just think it's terrific.
Thank you very much. Thank you for nominating us. Yeah, the Cycle Club, we're delighted that we won this. We're very keen that sorry, if I go back, and when we started, the Cycle Club started in 1987. For a long time, we were kind of just like a normal cycle club. We would do club runs, we would do races and things like that. And then we took a proper decision that we would try and extend what we do. So we now have a thriving children's section, we have a disabled section, but we can't do that without all the other volunteers that do it. And Ali is one of our coaches, and she's also one of the volunteers at the adaptive cycling. Alan was there in the pub when we decided, yeah, let's see if we can get some money to build this wheel park. And Alan's one of our coaches, and delighted to see he's back coaching with us again after his accident. So when we built it, it's kind of like the Field of Dreams things. You never really know what's going to happen. And I remember various times down at the park thinking, oh no, what have we done here? Oh, nobody's going to use this. But we're so delighted that Gordon Park again is thriving. You go down there, there's cricket on, there's tennis on, the swings are full, and the pump track and the cycle track's full. And it really is a sort of community asset. But we're only 2/3 there. we still have another section to build. We've still got the skate park that we want to build. So if anybody's got any money down the back of a sofa, just come and see me afterwards. But thanks again for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colin. And I think everybody here would agree with the response at the wheel park. It's a fantastic asset for Ellen, the surrounding area, and you've heard the contribution to the community. Well done. Thank you to all. And as we've heard, been instrumental in bringing the project to fruition. And there's a bit more to go, apparently. Can I turn to item 1, which is declaration of members' interests. Members, please state if you have any interest to declare, and if you have, please clarify agenda item number, nature of declaration, or whether or not you will leave the meeting. I have Councillor Hassan Andrew, and then Councillor Nicholl. Jenny, please. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Transparency statement from me for item 8. As everyone knows, I am this committee's appointed member to the Balmedy Leisure Centre Management Committee, and it does get a reference in that report. However, I don't see any reason to vacate the meeting, so I will remain and participate.
Thank you. And Councillor Nicholl. Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a transparency statement for me for item 6. I know some of the residents who have submitted representations. One's a community council member, another serves on community project. Whilst I'll always listen to residents' concerns, I have not provided a view, and having considered the objective test, I will stay and take part.
I see no other hands, so I'll move on to item 2. Resolution on equalities. Do you agree with the resolutions? And do you agree that we should take items 10 and 11 as exempt items on the likely disclosure of exempt information? Thank you very much. Item 3 is a minute of the meeting on the 19th of May, 2026. They are for approval as a correct record only. Can we agree it is a correct record? Thank you. That will allow us to turn to item 4, ECS year-end performance monitoring, and we have Mr. Finlay Lawrence to take us through, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. This report provides the year-end performance overview for ECS in Formartine, aligned to the Council Plan 24 to 29 priorities. So the overall picture in Formartine is more mixed than in some other areas at the end of this year, with half of performance measures exceeding or meeting target and half reporting as off target, highlighting a clear need for focused improvement. There are, however, important areas of strength, and I would highlight 3. One would be the strong and improving foundation apprenticeship outcomes, well above target. High levels of volunteering and community engagement through our Live Life Aberdeenshire services. A well-maintained estate with all facilities assessed as being in at least satisfactory condition. However, alongside those strengths, the report is clear about the key challenges which require attention. particularly the reduction in positive post-school destinations. In Formartine, these are now the lowest across the 6 council areas, and happy to unpick that and give a bit more detail on that later in the questioning part. A notable decline in literacy attainment at primary stages, alongside weaker performance in numeracy compared to some other areas, and reduced participation across our LLE services. However, there are some encouraging signs of progress, including improved attendance and increased uptake in early learning and childcare for those 2-year-olds who are eligible. So in summary, the report reflects both clear strengths but important challenges for the service, and it provides a strong basis for targeted action to continue improving outcomes for children and young people across Formartine. So I'll pause there, Chair. Plenty to get our teeth into, and happy to answer any questions you might have. Thanks.
So over to members. If I could perhaps start, and then you touched on the foundation apprenticeships. That has been such a success story and up to now, and I just wondered if there's any particular aspects that has led to the decline. Is it because there's just more coming on board, and therefore the success of it not quite so good, or are there other aspects?
So the foundation apprenticeships continue to be really strong in the Formartine area. I think the challenge we will have, not just in Formartine but across Aberdeenshire, will be sustaining that. So we've had the commencement now of the Tertiary Education Act, which shifts funding responsibility for foundation apprenticeships from Skills Development Scotland to the Scottish Funding Council, and the chair and opposition spokesperson, Councillor McAllister, who's here for ECS, wrote to the previous minister, and who's now returned in the same post as minister for further and higher education, just to seek some assurances in terms of funding. We've had a letter of reassurance to say that the fact that the funding model has changed should not impact our delivery model. So we wait to see how that plays out, because traditionally the Scottish Funding Council hasn't funded local authorities, it's funded college and university provision. However, we've had that assurance, so that's great. We've never had a cut in our grant from Skills Development Scotland, but we've now been running our own foundation apprenticeship programme for 7 years. So whilst the funding has never decreased, it's never increased. And as you know, costs have increased greatly in the past 7 years. So we are struggling to sustain a level of delivery that we would want to deliver. So I know that Andrew Ritchie, who you'll know well from my team, is working closely with a number of local businesses. He's working closely with Paul McCarry and his team, trying to attract further investment to allow longer term sustainability of the programme. My worry is that if we had to all of a sudden massively reduce our foundation apprenticeship cohort, that would put S4, 5 and 6 students back into school full time, and we're struggling to recruit teachers to deliver a timetable full time in some subject areas. So it's in everybody's best interest to do all we can to secure ongoing funding to ensure sustainability of our programme, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McAllister, please. Louise.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the update. I think one of the biggest areas that jumps out at me is that positive destinations that we've been so good at in the past. It's a wee bit alarming that Formartine is at the lower end of that table. Now, I was at the 150 celebrations of the Academy just last week, I think it was, and certainly there seems to be an improving picture in Ellen Academy, and not to pick out Meldrum and Tariff, but I'm really keen to know, do you think these figures are on being able to record the destinations? Have we lost touch with some of the people once they leave, or is it actually, an actual decrease in those positive destinations? And I suppose in either case, what can be done, please?
Thank you, Councillor McAllister. Through you, Chair. This picture is being seen across the authority. We've always had a high percentage of young people going into positive destinations. Very often at the end of S4, where we have a higher proportion of young people who still leave at the end of S4, particularly in the north area of Aberdeenshire, including the Formartine schools, I would suggest. But we have seen a slight decrease in many of our schools over the past year. And as you're aware, some of you may be aware, Susan and her team do performance reviews every year of all 17 academies. They go out starting in January, finish in March. And I tend to dip into some of these. And what's interesting is we're seeing this picture across Aberdeenshire. So the position seems to be worse than Formartine on the face of it. There will be differences and variation across the 3 secondary schools, however. But this can be attributed mainly to the increasing numbers of pupils who have struggled to engage with education in schools, some who've barely left home since COVID, and whilst they have been supported by their schools to continue with some form of education and gain awards in some cases, they're not in a position from a well-being perspective, usually mental health and well-being perspective, to accept a positive next step at this stage. So there's usually, and this is the reassuring part, there's usually multi-agency support around these young people, but it's an area which we are fully aware of and are working to try and address. There may be some solutions to supporting non-attenders to engage with learning. The social element of presenting in a building and interacting with others can be one of the greatest barriers when young people leave school. Susan also went back and looked at the notes from the 17 discussions she had with all the academies. And what we've also noted, and I don't know if this is an Aberdeenshire phenomenon or not, so I have no robust data on this, but it is Aberdeenshire data here. We've seen an increase in the number of pupils planning to take a gap year to travel. So if you take a gap year to travel, you're not recorded as being in a positive destination. Now, that's anecdotal, but it's coming up in a number of the performance reviews. And we're also seeing a number of pupils who've moved away out of Scotland in a few cases. And again, this results in us not having our eyes on them and their next step once they leave school. What was really reassuring, though, from the 3 performance reviews that I attended, and Susan would mirror this from the 17 that she did, because she does them all, is that our schools knew the story behind the percentages and without exception could talk about each of the young people from their school who fell into that category, what they've been doing to try and support this, and how closely they were working with Skills Development Scotland in relation to following up with these young people. Thanks, Chair.
It's very, very useful, and glad to hear that there's an element of following up afterwards. That would seem to be very constructive. Councillor Hassan, Andrew, please.
Just to follow up to that, Lawrence, recording these people that go away in a gap year, is there an actual mechanism to formally record that? Because these pupils that might go away are not necessarily not going to positive destination, because they might pick up life skills on that gap year, which, surely there must be some way of properly recording that because yes, they're leaving school, but they're not necessarily not leaving positively. It's a question I should probably ask at ECS committee, but it's not something I thought until you mentioned that just now, because that is still for them something really positive and they'll learn from.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hassan. Through you, Chair, I agree. I mean, for many young people, a gap year can be extremely profitable and valuable, and you can achieve a great deal from it. But in terms of our follow-up process, the process we have, it's after 6 months and then 12 months through Skills Development Scotland. They lead on that, and if you're off travelling in Bali or Australia or wherever, there's little way of keeping in touch with them and finding out how they're doing. So I think in terms of how we record it, I think it's recorded as other, but so that which is a catch-all for many things, but it's not included in our positive destination figures. But I think it's a good challenge and one that I'm happy to pick up through my ongoing discussions with Skills Development Scotland, who oversee this work.
I see no other hands, so can I turn to the recommendations, acknowledge and consider the progress, and 1.2.2 instruct the performance reports on to the area committee on a 6-monthly basis. Thank you very much indeed. Turning now to item 5, which is Environment and Infrastructure Services Performance Report, Q3 and Q4. And we have Alan Wood, Director, and Anna Thompson. Alan.
Chair, thank you very much. Good morning, members. I'm really pleased to be here and also to present the Formartine performance update for quarters 3 and 4 year-end position for 5-6, and also to set this in the context of both the first half of this year and also the same period last year. Overall, the position shows a return to a more stable performance after some variation earlier in the year. In the current period, the 10 indicators that are reported, 8 of these are on target, with 2 being off target. And that's a consistent position reported across the first 2 quarters, where 8 were also on target. So that's stability of performance, which is really useful and hopefully positive to report here. Looking back at the same period last year, performance has improved overall, with more indicators now meeting their target and fewer at alert than was the cases in quarters 3 and 4 of the previous year. In terms of the sustainable economy priority, performance remains strong. Planning determination times have stabilised following some volatility earlier in the year, and I would say continue to perform well against the target, reflecting a consistent level of throughput across the team, and I would say a more stable team in terms of the numbers that they have as well. In terms of one of the reds, the average weeks taken to determine householder developments rather than non-householder and rather than overall applications, the one on householder, 7.6 weeks time for Q3 and 7.6 weeks for Q4, the target 7. So that's where the red comes in, slightly above the 7-week turnaround target there. In terms of living well locally, the position is generally positive. An example being homelessness resolution times. They have improved within the current period and remain below the Aberdeenshire average. I know you know it, but it's also important to recognise that results can vary due to the relatively small number of cases in Formartine. Void rent loss is the other red, the second indicator is below, and that's void rent loss as a percentage of rent due. The void rent loss in Formartine for Q4 was just over £51,000, or 2.2% of rent due. A clear sign, I would say, of improvement compared to Q3, where it was 2.4. So 2.4 is going down to 2.2. Still above the local target and the Aberdeenshire target of 1.7. But statistically, with the margins, service-wise, it's a key point for individuals. I know that. Over the full year, performance has improved to 2.3, down from 2.8 when you look at the full year position. So it's an improving, but still above that 1.7 target. Overall, void rent losses is related to both the relet times and also the number of voids. And an important contributor to improvement is the reduced relet times, now averaging just over 50 days, down from about 53 days before. So again, a good direction of travel there, even if still showing an indicator it's not meeting target. In terms of the connected communities, performance remains more mixed, although still on target. Street lighting responses times continue to be an area to monitor. They are showing as green. I don't often say that in area committees, but today I can. They're showing as green. Of the 54 reported outages in Q4, 37 were dealt with within 7 days, and that's just over 68% of the target. The indicator is 62. I've been here before when I've talked about 80% plus, and not quite single figures, but much lower than that. So that volatility is there. The delivery of this is being managed more on a risk-based approach, prioritising repairs based on safety. But the 7-day target is still there. So in summary, the overall picture is one of stable and improving performance, which is, I'm very pleased to report, with strong delivery in planning, housing, and a small number of operational pressures are still understood and being actively managed, and they will be actively managed across the 10 indicators. Chair, I'll pause there. I'm happy to take any comments or observations from the committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. Over to committee. Councillor McAllister. Louise, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that update, Alan. I'm just interested in the voids, the period of time, that turnaround to have, properties used again, and what it is that contributes to that time frame. Is it matching tenants to a home? Are there repairs and reconditioning required, and the sort of cost implications of that? So just a wee bit more about those voids and what it is that sort of gives us that time frame, please.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, a mixture of factors. Matching is one, right family, right house. Repairs will come into that, although we are improving on that, and I'll expand on that in a second. And often there can be utility issues as well in terms of the ability to reconnect those utilities. And That hasn't been mentioned specifically for some time. It was a real issue before. It's still there. The improvement, though, in the times, I would say, is down to, and I say this a lot with housing, partly because it's true, but also because it's a real positive one, which is the relationships, the contact we have with current tenants and prospective future tenants, or people moving between properties as well. And that gives us a strong indication of what the requirements are and what the tenure is and what the size of property is there. And then also the ability to view a void property before it's available, and or to get agreement for the tenant to move in before it's 100% ready, also helps us to bring that time period down. And we're seeing some successes here across Aberdeenshire, and that's something that we are looking to further promote nationally as well, as I would say the housing service is one of the real positives that we're seeing across the council. Chair.
Thank you very much. If I can just comment that, well, thank you for the report, first of all. Comment about the excellent performance in most of the parameters. You highlighted the planning applications a little bit into the red, but in my eyes, not too discerning, because as I remember going back some time, we were struggling for planners. We were below our numbers. So overall, I would agree that it's an improving picture. Now then, Councillor Colley, John, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mine's just a quick one on the streetlight faults. Obviously, we've been taking some down because of the structural, they're not right. But were we finding that most of the faults were coming from them ones we're taking down? That been registered at all?
Through you, Chair. It's a yes and no answer on that one, which is not the best way to start a response, I know. The main reason for taking columns down is the structural integrity, or the fact that we've assessed, we've about 47,000 streetlights across Aberdeenshire, and we've been doing ongoing assessments there. So we are fortunate in many instances where the expected life of the streetlight will last longer, but where there is deficiencies in the structural integrity, we then take them down. Where there is faults, there can be a different set of reasons there, which can be the bulb itself. Now, the switch out from filament to LED gives us a much longer life, but sometimes there's the head on the streetlight itself, not just the bulb, that can go as well. And then there's general wiring. I won't begin to try and explain that. There's general wiring issues as well. So that's the yes, and there's a mixed picture there. And that's why I was looking at, when I said in the introduction, it's more priority and risk-based rather than time period. Time period is important, but we'll look at the prioritisation for repair as well. Chair.
Thank you very much. I see no further hands. So if I turn to the recommendations and 1.2.1, comments about considering and commenting the progress, which I think we've done. Thank you all very much indeed, and thank you, Alan, for the report. Now, at this point, I appreciate that the next item is a planning item, but we have a director that needs to be here between 11 and 12:30, and rather than go on to the planning item at this stage, I'm going to jump to item 8. The Formartine Area Committee budget, which will be Claire to introduce.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So members will be aware our budget this year has reduced by 50%. So our total budget this year is 17,800. We've laid out proposals based on these reduced figures. Obviously, it's in members' gift if you want to accept these proposals or revise them in any way. What we've set out is a reduced sum for the Improving Towns and Villages Fund, proportionate to the reduction in the budget. Year on year, our communities have shown us that for such small funds, they can achieve a lot in the community in terms of legacy, even keeping it tidy and everyone taking a pride in their town and village. I think that goes a long way. That would then leave us with a sum of just over 10,000 for a general projects fund. There are a few changes this year to the criteria, which is laid out in Appendix 1, mainly that we are now proposing that we align our priorities to our Formartine community planning priorities to be relevant to our area. We are suggesting that we reduce the maximum grant available to £2,000 in order that we can have a greater spread across the area. We would still require 50% match funding to that £2,000. I think those are the main changes, and we are also suggesting, due to the small budget, for efficiency and cost effectiveness of running it, due to the smaller figures, that rather than come back to committee each time with our applications and our improving towns and villages proposals, that the applications come in, be delegated to the area manager in consultation with the chair, vice chair and relevant local members to determine applications, noting it if there are any shire-wide applications, the delegation would be with the chair and vice chair and area manager.
Area-wide applications.
Yes, area-wide, sorry. I've also detailed in the appendices the feedback from our towns and villages from our Improving Towns and Villages last year, as well as all the projects that we funded under our General Community Fund. So happy to take questions if that's clear, and if it's not clear, happy to explain further.
Over to members, and Councillor Hassan, please. Andrew.
Not a question, but just a comment, Chair. I just want to, I'm sure I speak for all committee, to thank everyone that did feedback their comments as to what they spent the money on in the appendix to the report. Some have put some real detail into it, which, you know, I've read it all, and I do appreciate hearing what you know. It's not just a case of giving you out money; it's feedback what you've done with it. And I think I'm sure I speak for all committee. Thank you to everyone that did actually let us know how the money was spent, because that's good to know. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Are there any further hands or comments? No. Are we happy with the recommendations as shown under 1.2? Okay. So that will be unanimously agreed. I'm now going to turn to item 9, the Formartine Community Council funding. And again, it's Claire and Sarah. Claire, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as per the previous report, we've laid out the proposals for 26-27 for Formartine Community Council grants. The breakdown for Aberdeenshire-wide is shown in the appendices, and we also have the breakdown allocation for Formartine. The paper is going around the 6 areas. Last year, we started an exercise with our community councils, and we've asked them over this past financial year if they can note down all their admin costs and provide us with a breakdown. So over the coming months, when we're working through and ahead of next year, we should have a better picture of what it actually costs to run a community council. At the moment, we do a baseline figure of £600 and then per capita for our Formartine community councils. And we'd also like to get an understanding of, is per capita appropriate now in the digital age? Are our larger towns spending more than smaller, or are they broadly the same cost? We just don't know. So future reporting will have this additional information, but for this year, we are proposing the same split as previous years, which is as detailed in Appendix 2. But happy to take any questions.
Over to members. Councillor Nicholl. Jenny, please.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm supportive of community council funding and getting this out to them as soon as possible. But some of our community councils are really facing a lot of change at the moment in terms of the ECS LLA lets, and there's a lot of concern about places where they're not having to pay for lets just now that they may have to then in this coming year. And I was wondering, we as elected members have a workshop next week on these changes and how that's going to work for our community groups. It's not just community councils, I appreciate, but they are impacted in this paper. And I just wondered if it would be possible to defer this until the next cycle so that we could get behind the scenes and see what is actually happening with this LETS process. I realise that slows us up for a few weeks. However, it will still all hopefully be sorted by summer recess. I just feel that we're not really sure what it means for some of these community councils, and they don't either. And that uncertainty at the moment, I would like assurances on before we just approve their funding for the year. Just thoughts.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate. We have a briefing coming up. Is there any other contributions? Councillor Sterling, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I would be supportive of that deferral if that's appropriate. But if I think that would be helpful to take that time, just to maybe another cycle, just to come back. And the other option, of course, is that a delegation. But I would support Councillor Nichols' call for a deferral in this paper.
And our next meeting will be about the end of June.
Yes, we do have another meeting before recess, so it wouldn't have much of an impact if we defer for one cycle, Chair. In terms of getting more information, yeah.
My apologies to Councillor McAllister. Louise, please.
It's quite all right, Chair. And I was going to speak in support of that as well. I was thinking that in the interim, if we are gathering more information from community councils and their spend and their need and all of those things, that actually we could come up with a much more rounded view of what community councils need and spend and what they spend it on. And yeah, absolutely. I've had emails through already with people concerned that it's going to, well, discourage for a number of reasons, financially and otherwise. And I do know from one particular community council I work with, is that they very often go above and beyond themselves and photocopy things at home and all of those. So I think it is a really useful exercise. But yeah, absolutely, I think we should defer and as I say, come up with that more rounded overview if we can. Thank you.
Can I just come in, just to be clear, the piece of work that Claire was talking about, whilst that's all very, we all support it, the piece of work Claire's talking about is something that won't be complete by the next cycle. That's over months. We need to wait for all those reports to come through, the end of year audited accounts to come through so that we can do that assessment. So that's something that will run over a number of months. That's not a quick piece of work. So it won't, that piece of work assessing the spend across all the community councils won't be complete by the next cycle of this meeting, just for your awareness.
So the crux will be the LETS and how and where community councils meet within the Formartine area. That's information that we're hoping that will come back for the next meeting.
Yep, Chair, no problem. I'm happy to ask all our current community councils where they're meeting and that sort of information by next cycle. Yep.
Okay, with that amendments, are we happy with the recommendation therefore is to defer it to the next meeting, the next area meeting. Is that agreed all round, nodding heads? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. My difficulty at the minute is realising that we are progressing well. I'm intending, excuse me, coming back to item 7 at 11 o'clock, and then we'll deal with the planning matter on item 6. And 10 and 11 are exempt, which we'll deal with after that. So I'm going to suggest we take
Did you not say that the presenter for item 7 was available for 12:30?
No, he'll be available between 11 and 12:30. So
until 12:30.
Until 12:30.
So can we not just do this first and get it done?
Who will?
Yeah, because we've got speakers waiting to speak and
The only difficulty is we have moved on. Oh, Rob is available now. We can move to that.
Okay, so in that case, we will turn to item 7. And Rob should appear online if we just give him a second.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Welcome, Mr. Simpson. That was just excellent timing. So we're now turning to item 7, the business services performance indicator report, and I'll turn to you to introduce it, please.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee members. You'll see within the report that the overall performance, there's 15 indicators within the report. 7 are showing as green, so they are on track. 1 is amber, showing just off target, and 7 are data only, so demand-led indicators within the report. Overall, I think performance showing is fairly strong, fairly stable. Majority, as I said, meeting targets, and the pressures that we are seeing largely demand-led pressures coming through. So in terms of strengths, we have customer services, call wait time still sitting within target. So that's been a success story, I think, over the last 12 to 18 months. That has been in a fairly strong position. Call abandonment also within target, and the two of those are generally linked. We have seen increased demand coming through our contact centre, so that has, I think, been handled well, shown by those sitting within target. So that shows some relative strong performance. We have seen some good digital improvements as well coming through, so that different methods that people have in order to find the information that they require rather than just necessarily contacting us by phone. In terms of benefit processing, that shows as reasonably on target. New claims are dealt with within target for housing benefit and council tax reduction, and we see changes as notified to us being progressed fairly quickly, so just under 4 days for any changes to be processed through the system. So I think that shows again relatively good performance, despite what we have seen as a fairly quick transition to universal credit for claimants and rising caseloads coming through. So universal credit probably took us slightly by surprise over the last 6 to 12 months, with the majority of claimants being moved across quicker than we had previously been notified. So that was to be at a slower pace. It happened fairly rapidly over the last 6 to 12 months. In terms of asset condition, very strong locally, I would say, across Formartine. We have just under 98% of floor area in satisfactory condition, so that is above both the Aberdeenshire and Scottish averages. I think that shows particularly strong performance in that area. In terms of suitability, that's where the amber comes through, so suitability of buildings. Formartine, it's just under 85%. Corporately, it's 83%, so higher than the Aberdeenshire position, but still not quite where we would want it to be in terms of that suitability. And that we've spoken about previously. In terms of suitability, it could be accessibility, it could be toilet provisions, things like that, and we see those issues across depots and some of our assets. So we know where the issues are, and we're working through our disposal programme alongside that. So we know that there's some issues around that one. And just turning to some of the demand-led pressures that we see, we have seen an increase in crisis grants and an increase in spend in that area. We have seen a reduction in community care grant applications, but again, spend has gone up. So higher value of claims coming through there that are being met. Now, those are met through Scottish Government funding. That funding comes through to us, and then we deal with the claims themselves and pass that on to people. But we are, crisis grants particularly, cost of living is a factor in that, energy costs are a factor in that, and people just not being able to meet those basic costs that they have coming through to them. So that's where the crisis grant applications arise from. So very much not a service performance issue in that, but more demand-led concerns coming through from the cost of living and economic pressures faced by individuals and families. We see that across Aberdeenshire as a whole. I think key messages, I would say that relatively strong performance overall. So we are seeing pretty strong performance in a number of areas, particularly customer services. Asset condition is locally quite strengthened for Martin, but we do tie that, as I said earlier, into our disposal strategy, and we are looking at where buildings are not fit for purpose, what we do with them and how we dispose of them, and how we dispose of them quicker as well, as we work through that pipeline of disposals. And I think, Chair, that is all I wanted to say. Happy to pick up any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. Members, any questions? Councillor McAllister. Louise, please.
Sorry, Chair, you're hearing a lot from me today. Thanks for the report, Rob. What really interested me is that operational buildings that are suitable for current use, because that's quite a broad umbrella, if you like, of just what it is. What is it that makes a building suitable for use? Now, you mentioned there accessibility in terms of disabled access, etc., toilets, that kind of thing. So those are sort of quite, to me, they're sort of practical points that you can literally pinpoint what the issues are there. Does that also cover buildings that are simply poorly heated, poorly ventilated, in poor condition in terms of maybe, furniture, flooring, that kind of an idea that would need to be upgraded? Or is it actually those really physical points that you can pinpoint more easily, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does, through you, Chair. Yes, it covers all those areas. So the things that you've mentioned as well, it can be that there's not adequate heating within the building, so it's not fit for purpose based on that. It can be that the condition and furnishings of the building are not suitable for their use as well. So that there's a number of different factors. There's no national standard around this one, so it is kind of based on our own definitions around this. I think there is some consistency across local authorities, but I'd say it's not set nationally in terms of what suitability actually looks like. But we do encompass everything that's been mentioned.
Thank you. Councillor Hassan and then Councillor Crowley. Andrew, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a shout out to your directorate team, Rob. I think this is a largely positive report and it should be welcomed by your whole team, so congratulations. I particularly want to shout out the customer service team in the call centre because the report tells us there was an increase in calls, but despite that, the average call wait times were below the revised target and the abandonment rate has also reduced. So whatever's happened there is working really well. So congratulations and keep up the good work, your directorate, please, because this is a really positive report. Thank you.
Thank you. I will pass that on.
John, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for the report. I was just wondering, on your figures on the state of our buildings when it comes to satisfactory, when do we take the figures out for the properties which are up for sale or actually been taken out of service completely? When do we take that figure out?
I think they are removed at point of sale. So once we have sold the building, they would be removed. They still sit within our asset base. So even once they're declared surplus, they are still our building. I'll check with the team. We possibly remove it at the point that we are no longer utilising it. So sometimes that would be before point of sale, and we may remove it from that point if we are not using that building. But I'll check just to confirm with the team, and I will circulate that response around the committee. Thank you.
Very useful. Yes, I think that'd be helpful. Councillor Johnston, Paul, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, hi, Rob. Could I basically ask if the figures which you show for the suitability actually include measures of emissions and contribution towards climate targets? Because all the stuff which is now coming from the Scottish Government to us and etc. is asking us to be aware and be more careful with those particular those types of figures. Now, this is not yet a national reporting figure, and yes, I'm in accept of that, but it is good that we manage emissions and suitability for, well, for example, whether you put solar PV in, whether you insulate the building and all the rest of it, that level must contribute to its suitability for its long-term use.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. No, we don't include that measure at the moment. So emissions from a building do not fall into that suitability piece. It would be more around, is the heating suitable and adequate for the building rather than the heating type and source at this point in time. But that is certainly something we can look at going forward in terms of the emissions coming from the building and whether there's renewable energy issues with that building and things that we can solve by PVs, etc., etc. So we can certainly look at that going forward.
Is that an actual project that's in train, or is that something you will now have to you have to invent and implement for the future?
So it's not something that's in train for all of our usable buildings. What we are looking at, we do look across our stock in terms of where can we put PVs. We've obviously had programs in the past in terms of schools and things like that. We do look at what buildings would best benefit from those, but it's not something that's in train in terms of tying that into suitability of buildings.
Would it be something that would be useful to actually bring to committee at some point?
Through you, Chair, it's certainly something we can explore and look at whether that would be useful to take forward and brief back through committees and how we would best tie that in suitability. But we can look at that, as I say, and we'll look at the best way of bringing that through if that's the right thing to do.
Well, I think it would be very positive, but thank you, Rob.
Okay, thank you very much. I was going to comment, but you highlighted already, Rob, about the crisis grants, realising that they increased something like 10%, but the value was more than that, probably 30–40%, but a reflection on, as you said, energy costs and such like. So I don't think there's any need to further comment. I don't see any further hands at this stage, so that allowed me to turn to the recommendations. We've acknowledged and considered and commented. And 1.2.2 is instructing a report, a performance report on 6-monthly basis to the area until the appropriate place plans are in place. Are we happy with that recommendations? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. The time is 10:43. We will be coming back to item 6, the planning application, but we've already told some contributors and requests to speak. It'll be done at 11. That particular item will be from 11 o'clock. So my suggestion is we take a 15-minute break through to 11 o'clock.